Warning. The following scenes may contain references to power pages and portals which some listeners may find disturbing, especially if you've struggled with poor training in the past. Hey all, Franco Musso here. Yes, I've hacked your podcast feed. I've held John and Mike hostage, but don't worry, I got my wires crossed and I'm actually paying them a small ransom in the form of sponsorship. Go figure. So, by popular demand, I'm cooking up 2 brand new offerings to help you get your portal projects off the ground in 2024. The first is my group coaching program launching in March. Join me and a cohort of other budding portal makers for live coaching sessions, weekly live training, office hours, Q&A, and surgeries. I'll guide you through the process from zero to launch, all at a fraction of the cost of hiring a freelancer or a contractor. It's like having a trusted partner on hand, helping you avoid the pitfalls, saving you a ton of money, headache, and time. Plus, you're bound to learn lots from others in the group as we discuss their experiences, challenges, and solutions. To apply, head on over to francomusso.com/group-coaching. You can now take your fingers out of your ears and enjoy the awesome that is Sprint Zero.
Hello everyone and welcome to episode 11 of the Sprint Zero podcast. My name is John Russell and I'm here with my co-partner crab in crime, Mike Gowland. Say hello Mike, how are you?
Hello Mike, how you doing?
Very good. Yeah. Today we are joined by Dan Barber. Dan is the head of business applications at ANS as well as Business Apps MVP. He's an active contributor both in the Dynamics and Power Platform community, co-runs the Bristol user group, which is next meeting on the 22nd of February. And he's also the co-host for the National All-Day user group being held at Microsoft Paddington on 28th of February. Something that's featured a lot on this podcast over the last few episodes. He also regularly talks about imposter syndrome, something we will no doubt get into on this one too. He's got a strong beard game. I know you can't see him, but it's very chiseled. He's also a lover of whiskey. Welcome, Dan, to the podcast. How are you?
Hey guys, thanks for having me. Awesome to talk to you guys. And yes, whiskey is definitely something that is right up my street. So I can certainly talk you through some of my favourites.
Oh, please do.
Nice.
I drink whatever's cheapest at Lidl, so I definitely need some stalling.
I just can't get on with. I'm going to be the person that says it. I just can't get on with whiskey. I know it's like some kind of acquired taste, but I don't know. I'd rather drink gasoline. I think petrol.
I think I kind of bullied myself into it. It was kind of like whiskey's supposedly really, really cool, so I have to like it. So I really need to find a way to be able to drink it. But I started off with one of my old colleagues, and he was just giving me all this really heavy peaty, smoky whiskey. And I was like, I can't drink this. I really can't drink this. And it was only when someone introduced me to Japanese whiskey that I actually got into it. Went, this is quite nice actually, because it's lighter, a little bit more floral. And so it's just kind of like finding what flavor works for you. Really, there's a lot of snobbery around whiskey, but for me, I just like, well, if I like it, I don't care how much it costs as long as it's not stupidly expensive. It's all about what you like. So yeah. Tastes lots of different stuff.
Every drink though, even craft beer. There's definitely a lot of snobbery around that.
Yeah, I don't think there's snobbery around Carlsberg and Foster's and.
Quite right, they aren't they?
Yeah. Note self.
I'm just hoping Chris Huntsman is listening to this.
So Dan, the first thing we ask every guest is, how did you get to where you are today, and what did your journey look like?
Yeah, so I guess I was kind of fortunate actually. I always knew I was going to be a geek. Always knew I was going to be into tech. I started designing access databases with VBA way back in the day, like while I was still at school. Even got paid for some of them, which was amazing. Started with that. Went to uni, did a computer science and business degree. And then just kind of went out into the world. So started like end client, like a lot of people do. And within 6 months of joining as a graduate, my boss left the company, and his boss decided that he wasn't going to hire anyone to replace him. So I was like, 6 months out of uni, I've got a Great Plains finance system, a Siebel CRM system, and a whole lots of websites to look after. And I'm like, okay. So yeah, it was kind of like thrown into the deep end, and yeah, sink or swim. So I think I swam. So spent quite a few years there, and then replaced Siebel with Dynamics CRM3 was the first time I kind of got involved in the Dynamics side of things. And out of that, I was fortunate enough to join Neil Benson's startup, which was called Increase CRM at the time. So my first entry, I think, is probably the best way to get into consulting was working with Neil. He's absolutely phenomenal. For those of you don't know him, he's another Microsoft MVP for biz apps, but does an awful lot of work with Agile, particularly Scrum, and adapting that to Dynamics implementations. And it was still as a mentor, and he just took me on that journey. After that, it was just onwards and upwards. It was looking after professional services teams, and getting to grips with the ever-changing landscape of Dynamics. Right from version 3 all the way to where we are now. It's been a heck of a journey, but loved it.
Nice. Neil Benson's a pretty much go-to guy for anything and everything Agile. Should probably give Danny Cahill a shout out as well. I don't know if you ever come across Danny's stuff, but yeah, I went on a course of his kind of at the middle of last year. That was really, really good.
Danny Hamish.
Hamish. Yeah. What's Hamish's surname? Is it Hamish Shield? Is that it?
Yes, that's right. Spot on.
Yeah.
Yeah, those three. I use a lot of content from those guys.
Nice. I know you're a mentor and coach as part of the Power Platform School Initiative. I just wondered if you could kind of go into a little bit more detail about the mentor kind of mentee relationship, and kind of important factors around that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've been in the fortunate position to be a line manager for the majority of my career, but I think there's a real distinction between managing someone, leading someone, then the kind of mentoring kind of aspect to it. I think often people bumble them all together, but actually I think there's discrete skill sets there that to separate out. I think for me, one of the leading things whenever I'm mentoring a new person is creating a safe space. It's a very big thing to go out there and put yourself out there and say, I want to be mentored, much the same way it is to mentor someone else. The imposter syndrome creeps in. You go well, who am I to tell someone how to do things? I'm just me. But as a mentee, someone putting themselves out there to get support, I think is a really big thing. So for me, first thing, really important to create that safe space, open, honest, a trusting space where you can speak your mind, and not be ridiculed or lambasted or anything like that for anything you say. So that's my thing. And I think people often think of a mentoring thing as a one-way relationship. It's just oh well, someone's come to me to be mentored, and it's so I'm just going to talk at them and just spill my brain out and tell them everything that I think they need to know. But it's very much, I think, to look at it as a two-way relationship. I get as much from my mentoring sessions as I do from hopefully from the other person. So it's very much two-way. You learn about things just as when you present a topic. The more you talk about something, the more you learn about it, and you go, oh, actually, I just got challenged on that, and that's a fair challenge because I didn't think about it through that lens. So really, really good to get the two-way conversation going. And I think a skill I've picked up over the years is something from it was a leadership program I was on years and years ago. But this model of advocacy and inquiry. And funnily enough, I've been mentoring a couple of people over the last few weeks, and this topic has come up actually. And it's advocacy is all about explaining and imposing your viewpoint on someone, and then the inquiry is more about leading them to get to their own conclusions, asking questions, the interview type style. And it's not a black and white thing. There are certain situations you need to figure out when it's right to use more advocacy, when it's right to use more inquiry to kind of take them on their journey. but to be cognizant of that, I think, is really, really important.
And have you, without naming names, have you ever had a situation where a mentor-mentee relationship hasn't worked, and how have you handled that if you have?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. You know, yes, I've had situations where the mentee mentor relationship hasn't worked. I think most of the time it hasn't worked is when it's been in more of an enforced mentoring situation where someone's
Yeah,
got to do mentoring as part of a scheme or a program or something like that. You don't get the buy-in necessarily that you would always get from someone naturally coming to the conclusion that I'd like to get mentored. I'd like to get something from this.
yeah,
So I think very much mentor programs, you've got to be all in. It's got to be something that you truly want, not ticking a box.
yeah, yeah. Fair points.
I like what you were saying about well, just about mentoring in general, because the way that I've seen mentoring, because I have a number of mentors, and the way that they're sort of done that way is that they guide me to the answer rather than tell me.
Mhm.
So a good example is Chris Huntingford was my mentor for public speaking, and rather than telling me how to do public speaking, he guided me to, okay, create a Sessionize account and title a session and submit it. It wasn't telling me how to do it, but it was how to get me to a point that I could then help myself.
Mhm.
So it's
Yeah.
quite interesting how you say about advocacy and that sort of like guidance element as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean that inquiry thing is, I think, is a very, very powerful thing. But I would also say that don't completely ignore the advocacy piece as well, because sometimes some you could be completely new to a particular technology or particular situation, and what you need right now, what's going to support you the most, is someone to give you some kind of framework to work from. So there is an amount of telling, but I, I quite often I find myself on a session and I'll be like, Dan, you're talking too much. You're telling too much. You're taking over the conversation. Let take a step back. Let that person talk. Let that person have an opinion, a viewpoint. Let them get to a conclusion on their own. And we're all guilty of it.
Mm. Yeah, it's that talking at people, isn't it? Yeah, I've definitely I've been guilty of that sometimes. I started to recognize when it happens, and I try and stop myself. And so, Dan, how important would you say agile methodology is in a dynamics implementation? Is there a different approach to agile when it comes to D365 compared to Power Platform?
So, as I mentioned earlier, I was fortunate enough to be schooled under the Mr. Benson. So, Agile has always been something that I've got a lot of exposure to in Dynamics, and I find myself very fortunate for that. It's still a mixed bag whether people will adopt a more waterfall or agile approach in Dynamics. I personally have a preference for agile. I think it's a great way, and I think a great way of delivering projects, and I think it's more suitable to technology nowadays. Technology is moving so fast. Weekly releases, monthly releases, quarterly releases. Stuff is always coming out, always changing. Gone are the days where you go off, and every 3 years you do a big bang project and change your technology base. We are changing on a continual basis. We should be changing on a continual basis now and evolving. So for me, I think agile is a really, really good fit. But with agile, like with everything, it has to be the right fit for the right situation. I'm not one of these people who has the dogma of waterfall is bad, agile is good. I think you've got to find the right fit for it. People are a massive thing in agile. Making sure you've got that commitment from the people that you're working with to the agile way of working. It's fast and it's furious. Yeah, agile. And not everyone is geared up to be able to do that. You start a project and say, so, we're going to take you out of your day job for 70% of the time, and your boss is still going to expect you to do your day job 100% of the time. We find that all the time. So this is where you kind of got to make sure you you look at the people, look at the stakeholders you're going to be working with to ensure that they can make that level of commitment. And you raise an interesting point there about, is Agile just as good a fit for Dynamics as it is Power Platform? I think, does it differ? I think fundamentally no. Agile, you can apply Agile to anything inside tech and outside tech, in terms of building products or delivering projects. But I think the differentiator, but this again is part of the Agile framework, is who you've got on your team. Power Platform, you've got different skill sets, and you build those skill sets up for, if you're building, a Copilot, or you're building a Canvas app or something like that. You have the base skill sets that you need. But on the dynamic side, if I was going to deliver a customer service omni-channel voice-enabled, project, then I would have to be a little bit more selective of who I had on that particular project, because you're building on a first-party app. So therefore, there is a discrete amount of knowledge really that's required. It's not mandated. You can bring someone fresh, but your velocity, your speed of delivery will be slower with someone who's fresh. Whereas if you're bringing someone in who's mature and who's experienced, then the velocity is going to be faster. And you might have to shift people in and out of that team to get the right skill set. Whereas, Canvas app, if you put a Canvas app developer, and I'm oversimplifying it here, but if you put a Canvas app developer and a Copilot developer in there, irrespective of the Canvas apps and the Copilots you're trying to develop, it's the same skill set. But does that make sense?
It does, yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah. Because with Dynamics, you are configuring, right? You're configuring the product. You are adding customizations on there, but a lot of it is around the configuration, and that requires that intricate knowledge of the product.
Mm-hmm.
Would you say that's a fair assessment?
Yeah, absolutely. It's but I mean, the more aligned to Agile that we can get, the better. We often find on projects because there's no trust there, and I think trust is a really important factor with Agile, because it's the scope that's totally variable. And I've met very few customers who or stakeholders who go, I trust you. I've never worked with you before, but I trust you. If I invest this, you're going to deliver what I want. It's quite a hard barrier to get over. So building that trust up, we find that we can shift people towards more purer Agile methodologies, the more developed that trust and developed that relationship is, which is great, because you might start off with a slower momentum, but actually once that trust has built up, you're smashing through the work, smashing through the sprints and iterations really, really fast.
And we had Stuart Baxter on about 2 weeks ago now, when this episode airs, and he was explaining that at DC Thompson they were using Agile. Was that right, John, for their storyboarding? Yeah. So it is really interesting, like you say, you can sort of fit Agile into beyond software development. It has its place in other types of projects as well, and that was a really interesting example of how it's used there.
Yeah.
Does anyone mind if I just polish my sword while we continue, though?
Polish your sword?
Yeah, just don't mind me. Just
it's a really good job. There's no video on this.
Yeah.
Wow. So, Dan, if you can answer while Mike is polishing his sword, do you? I know you've used the term continuous improvement culture. Can you kind of explain what that means? I think it kind of leads on to what you were talking about a little bit there, but yeah, could you explain what that is?
Yeah. So it's as you said, it does. It's instilled in the fact that we're in a fast-paced environment. Stuff is moving faster than we can probably keep up with it, quite frankly. And I think some continuous improvement is the velocity. If you drive it back, you probably go back to sort of Kaizen, Japanese automotive kind of philosophies, lean manufacturing, that kind of thing. So I was lucky enough to work for Mars through a few sort of work placements and things like that, and on my my placement year at uni, and I was part of something called a reactive engineering team. What we used to do is they were building coffee machines, and they'd have something called a tack clock. And every like 8 minutes and 27 seconds, a machine would roll off the end of the production line. And our job was to spend all week thinking about how we can get that 8 minutes, 27 seconds down to 8 minutes, 26 seconds. And we'd be scratching our heads all week trying to think, right, what can we do? Analyze this, analyze that, spaghetti diagrams here, there, and everywhere. And then at the weekend, we'd come in, we'd rip the production line apart, and we'd rebuild it. And we'd jiggle the jobs around and stuff to try and make the boat go faster, as Jason's fond of saying. And I think that it's just instilled this thing in me that things can always improve, and I think we should always be reflect on what we do. Introspection on what we do, how we do it, and feed that back. I think we've all worked in organizations or in teams where we've done something and something hasn't gone as well as we wanted it to, and then we've not done anything about it, and lo and behold, you've gone on to the next thing that was similar to that, and you've fallen into the same pothole again. And I've tried to build up the mentality with the people that I work with that we're all responsible here. We've all got accountability to make sure that we learn from our mistakes, and we learn and continuously learn and feed that back into the process. And I think that's what I found over the years, is that there's a tradition to try and think that's always a manager's job, or something like that. Whereas I think it's something that should be instilled in every individual. We all do these things. We all work on these things. We all can influence improvements. And it goes back to the culture you work in, right? I'm fortunate that we're in a culture that you can think about an improvement, and you're empowered. You've got the autonomy to actually say, I'm going to influence this. I'm going to do something a bit different. And you're able to do that. So I would urge anyone listening to this, continuous improvement is great in my mind, in my opinion. But to do it effectively, you've got to empower people so they've got the autonomy to do it themselves, so everyone's involved with that continuous change. Because if you bottleneck it on one person, it's going to be very, very slow improvement.
I think the key thing that you said was you said about autonomy, and I think that's really important. I think we've all been in roles where maybe we haven't had that autonomy, haven't had that ability to be able to speak up and say what we need to say. And I think the only way you can do that is to kind of make sure that as a line manager, you're fostering that kind of two-way conversation that is based in truth, basically, and you can be honest and you can say what you need to say. But to do that is a massive thing. It comes quite easy to some people, comes quite difficult to others. It's quite hard for others to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And I think part of that is definitely around growth mindset and kind of critical thinking. If you want a project and you can see something potentially that might go wrong, it's about, putting your hand up and saying, well, actually, this possibly could be an issue and I'm going to flag it now. Otherwise, it could be a bigger issue later on.
Yeah.
100% agree, and it kind of overlaps with what we're talking about mentoring as well. Mentoring doesn't need to be a formal relationship. It's something that is a natural web, a network of interactions you have on a day-to-day basis. And what I led with was that idea about creating a safe space. That's a message to everyone. Creating a safe space in all of your interactions for me is really important. Be open, be honest. Great ideas and great feedback can come from everywhere. You don't have to think about a hierarchy all the time. We're a group of very, very capable people. You work with groups of very capable people. So, trust them, let them be open, get that ideas and feedback back.
So, Dan, we have a section on this podcast called Uncomfortable Corner.
And you're now going to ask me what that uncomfortable situation is, apart from being asked this question.
Yes, please. Yeah, apart from being asked this question, what should we polish my sword? What was?
Yeah, to be fair, I could just I could just replace it with watching Mike polishing his sword whilst trying to have a serious conversation with John.
It is. So just for the listeners,
what did I learn
it is
from
a
this
real
situation?
sword. It's not a yeah.
There's so many questions.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking, trying to think apart from, I mean, we briefly touched on imposter syndrome. So to be quite truthful and honest, every day involves an uncomfortable situation for me. That's something that I continually work on and develop. But I know you're looking for something sort of more specific, and I think the one I'm thinking of is actually around, funny enough, feedback again. I know we've touched on it a bit this session, but I received some feedback personally the other day, and I think of myself as someone who's normally fairly open to feedback and take it quite positively. And this feedback kind of, I don't know what it was. It just kind of hit me, and I was just like, oh right. And my instinct was defensive. Instinct was like, right, the gloves have come up, and the defenses have come on, and like fortunately, I think I've schooled myself a lot recently and over the years to sort of say, right, okay, actually, no, don't put the defenses down. Feedback generally is coming from a good place. Very few pieces of feedback come from a bad place. So what's this person trying to say? What was the reason for feeding that back? And actually, thank you for feeding it back, because 9 out of 10 people don't offer that feedback. They will think something and not saying it. So I kind of schooled myself into like, actually, no, this is really good. And I took it away, thought about it a little bit, and then I came back and went, right, okay, I want to do something about this now. I've taken it on board. I understand the feedback, but I want to know more now. So you've given me an example of what the situation was and how I dealt with it, probably in a way I could have dealt with it better. So let me unpick that. Let me try and figure out, right, how could I do that better? Because at the end of the day, I wasn't, the feedback was on how I dealt with a particular person. I won't go into the specifics, but it was how I dealt with a particular person. And in actual fact, when I was dealing with that person, I was coming from a good place as well. I was the one giving the feedback, so it was about my feedback style. And it was like, I'm actually trying to help and be supportive, but it didn't come across in the right way. So I was like, actually, I do a lot of, coaching and mentoring and stuff. I'm a line manager. I should be able to do this better. I need to learn from this. So I've taken upon myself to go back to that person and unpick it, and to think about, how did that land? Why did it land the way it landed? And how can I adapt that? Because at the end of the day, I'm trying to help that person out, but it didn't end up helping them. It hindered them. And that's the last thing I wanted.
Do you think, Dan? Do you think an emotional response to feedback can be helpful, or is it always a hindrance?
Oh, good question.
Because I suffer from this quite badly. Like sometimes if I get feedback, I take it quite personally, and I kind of like go inward on myself a little bit, when really actually I should step away and kind of like just take some time and then come back to it. And I always come back with a slightly different response than if I had just responded in the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I think having a few seconds to think about it, I think an emotional response to a certain degree is, I would almost say, required, because your emotional response to that feedback tells you something. It tells you whether you care about whatever that feedback was on, or whether it's something you're passionate about. If you have a very emotional response to it, it's probably a really good indication that you're incredibly passionate about whatever that topic was. And that's close to your heart. It means something. Therefore, that's a good measure, a good metric of, right, actually, I should be reacting to this. Maybe not negatively. The emotion, I don't want to let my emotion go too far, but actually the size of my emotional response tells me that actually this is important. And I then take that step back, have a breather, and reflect on it. It's just like when you we've probably all done this. How many people have actually got an email that's angered them or stressed them out, and you've instantly keyed out a response to it, and then you've just let it sit there for half an hour, and then you've gone, no, let's put that one in the bin. Let's write a different response. I know I've been there 100 times, and it's the same thing with feedback. I think is take it on board, understand the emotional response, understand why you had that emotional response, and then think, actually, right, did this person outwardly try to harm me by giving me that feedback, or do you think it was actually coming from a good place? Am I empathizing with their situation? Maybe I did something to cause aggravation to them in some way because of the way I acted. So how are they feeling? And that time gives you a little bit of reflection space, and then you can move forward and say, right, okay, you might not agree with it in the end, but you also might find some truths in there that will help you develop personally.
So Dan, we've talked a lot in this episode about imposter syndrome, and myself, and I'm not sure if John has or not. We've actually seen your session on that topic. I think I saw you at the South Coast User Group deliver it. Something that stood out to me was it was a comment about social media and the impact that could have on the imposter syndrome. So, do you think? Would you agree that platforms like LinkedIn can sometimes act as an echo chamber that can affect those who might be feeling imposter syndrome? And I'm thinking more specifically around things like certifications and posting that out. How do you what do you think
Yeah,
about that?
I think I'm still to this day intimidated by social media. I'm on LinkedIn. I have a vague presence on Twitter. I'm not on things like Instagram and stuff like that. I use LinkedIn a lot as someone who absorbs a lot of content, not producing a lot of content. And it is I'll use the phrase swings and roundabouts. It can be a good and a bad thing. It can be a very intimidating space. I found there's so much information out there. It's like a land grab. You're trying to read everything. I remember when I first went on Twitter or X. I was trying to keep up with all the tweets. I didn't really get it, so I was like kind of it's like if I've not opened X for a week, I was trying to read a week's worth of tweets. So it can be very intimidating. So you need to understand and set yourself some personal limits. I think with social media, what time are you dedicating to it, or what are you there for? What is it giving you? I think is the important thing to focus on. The moment it becomes a chore or becomes stressful, then that's where you need to sort of reassess and take a step back. I mean, you read all the time about people going, you know what, I'm taking a month off social media and taking a step back from it, and I'm going to take a
Yeah,
break. And I totally get that. It can be really, really overwhelming with the amount of information there.
yeah,
I was going to say, on the flip side, it's not just negative. That was where it could perform a hindrance, but it also gives people a real nice platform. Liking a post is a gentle introduction. Putting your opinion out there. It's not making a comment. It's not putting anything to. You're literally just putting a thumbs up and saying, I agree with that comment, or I like that bit of content that you've produced. And then you can up that to making a comment, and then hopefully you get some feedback on your comment, a thumbs up or maybe a reply to that comment, and it gently introduces you to that concept that you have a voice, you have experience, you have knowledge that someone else wants, or opinions that other people align to. And I think that's the really healthy side of things. And you can obviously go all the way up to people like Keith, who are LinkedIn learner trainers and things like that. So it's healthy, but you need to set your own limits. I think your own guardrails.
yeah. And I think that, as you sort of mentioned just then, is that it also applies to the content that you consume as well. So whether that comes into your feed, how do you process that content, right? So do you see that somebody's passed the PL 600 and then feel, oh god, well I haven't even done the 200 yet, like I'm falling behind. I need to up my game. I need to do this, start dedicating my entire life to getting all the certifications. Like it's sort of getting, as you say, there's positives and negatives, right?
Yeah. The latest one is the applied skills, isn't it? Like, absolutely fabulous. Everyone's popping up at the moment with the new applied skills. I'm like, I haven't taken any of them.
Yeah. Well, I took one and it crashed on me, and then I didn't get the result at the end. I had to wait 3 days to take it again.
I think it's also people's perception of those posts. Like, I think I don't feel as emotionally, or not emotionally, that's not the right word. I don't feel as reactive to what I see on LinkedIn. I don't feel it personally. Maybe I don't know. Maybe because I'm contributing to that echo chamber. Maybe sometimes I don't know. Yeah, it's a weird one. And maybe that's kind of like there could be an element of like unconscious bias somehow in things like that. I don't know. It's a really interesting, perplexing kind of situation, I think, and how it affects people differently.
Yeah, and over time, that how it makes you feel will change as well. You know, how what kind of headspace you're in, it will make it reflect and change on you as well. So, and don't be afraid of taking a step back like people do. I think that's actually a really smart, healthy decision to say, yeah, I can live with this without this for a month. You know, it'll still be there when I get back.
Oh yeah, and you probably won't actually miss out on as much as you feel like you would if you step away from the likes of LinkedIn for a little bit.
Yeah. So I don't know if anyone's seen Dan recently, but he's sporting a very nice beard, and you know, as bearded gentlemen ourselves, I like the coiffured facial bristles.
What are you going on about, John?
I'm just saying he's got a nice beard. There you go.
Well, you're just trendsetters.
Well, I get very annoyed with my beard.
They take a lot more maintenance than I remember.
It doesn't really grow.
No, they do. It's oiling, it's combing. I mean, I'm actually combed mine today, so it's very, very crazy. But yeah, it needs a good oil. Needs a lot of combing. I need to go to I go to a special barber for mine to get it like neatened up. Beard lines. Don't ever do a beard line yourself, and trust whoever's cutting your beard line for you, because it can go very right or it can go very, very wrong.
Yeah, I watched quite a few YouTube videos to try and figure out beard lines. So I did cut my own. So maybe I got wrong there.
Well, no, you can cut your own, but the trick is like, I think if you like close your neck in so you get like a double chin. I think it's like the second chin is like that's your beard line that you cut to. That's what I've heard.
Yeah, the grooming routine when you got a beard. I mean, God, like you said, oil. There's oils and balms and particular conditioners and combs, and it's just like, oh my God! Like I used to have about 3 things in my wash bag, and now I need to buy a bigger wash bag.
Yeah. And what I hate as well is having to trim the mustache, because you always end up with the little hairs in your mouth.
Yes,
the mustache would just end up covering your lip, and at some point you've got to just run the razor just over that bit and that bit. But like for the rest of the day, you will have.
I find that part really tickly. Like when it's being cut by someone, I have to kind of do that myself, because if they're doing it, I'm like all over the place. I just want mine to grow longer, but it never grows longer ever.
It's time, John. That's what you need. Is time.
How long do you reckon it's taken you to get to where you are, Mike?
I shaved off my whole beard in lockdown. It was actually quite funny. I did a Lemmy thing, so like I cut here and I cut here, so I just ended up with a handlebar mustache.
Love it.
Went down and greeted the wife, and she screamed at me. So I rested it off.
I think last time I had a beard, I did the whole shave it off in parts and take photos for comedy value.
Yeah.
Nice.
So I think it took about a year really to like really grow out, but after 6 months it was a decent size. It got really, really long in lockdown that I had to end up having to cut it. And my hair got really long as well. I just decided to grow my hair out. So
Yeah. I went afro during lockdown. Like
Did
proper. Yeah, my hair went like this.
I feel like we need a picture of that.
Yeah.
I also found that there's a lot more grey hairs in the beard than there was 12 years ago. Last time I had a beard.
Yeah, man. Faux show. But I like grey hair. I, as you can see, I'm just trying to go full silver fox.
Anyway, I think that's all we've got time for this episode. Dan, thank you so much for being a guest on the podcast today.
I was going to say, it's just been a pleasure, guys.
You can find Dan Barber on LinkedIn and occasionally on X if he remembers to open it up. Links to resources mentioned in this episode will be in the show notes. Music today was provided by Ken Like Fit. You can find his music on Spotify, the link to which you can find in this episode's show notes. Be sure to subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss the next episode. We would also really appreciate it if you gave us a follow on LinkedIn. And if you're really enjoying the podcast, please give us a review on your chosen podcast platform. Thank you. This has been Sprint Zero, and we've been John Russell. Say goodbye, John.
Bye.
Dan Barber. Say goodbye, Dan.
Bye, everyone.
And I'm Mike Gowland. We'll see you in the next episode. Bye. Oh, it's Valentine's Day. Love you, John.
Love you, Mike. Love you, Dan, as well.
Love you guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah.
Warning. The following scenes may contain references to power pages and portals which some listeners may find disturbing. Especially if you've struggled with poor training in the past. Hey all, Franco Musso here again. Quick update on that hostage situation. Hopefully the smell isn't coming across the airwaves. I haven't let the guys use the bathroom yet, so the joke's definitely on me. Anyway, big announcement. I'm finally releasing my online Power Pages course. This has been 5 years in the making. It's tried and tested on citizen devs and portal makers all around the world. It's the course I wish existed when I was getting started. It's practical, it's hands-on, and it's project-based, so you're not wondering how the heck this would apply to the real world. I've built in battle-tested lessons I've learned from tens of successful portal projects across various industries, budgets, and geographies, and I've formulated the most efficient route from zero to heroic launch. The tools and techniques I've chosen to show you are all based on what adds the most value to you, the learner, and to your customers, all in the most compressed timeline possible. Think 80-20, focusing on the techniques that punch above their weight and deliver the majority of results. You'll get video lessons, a repeatable framework, and some super helpful worksheets. Visit francomusso.com/power-pages-course and register your interest. Disclaimer, this course isn't for you if you prefer hours of slides, theory, and little to no action. You can now take your fingers out of your ears and enjoy the awesome that is Sprint Zero.